Hey TechKnowStuds, back with email protocols and how we get email from one person, one user to another user. All right, in this video, what we're going to be covering is emails and DNS, what the relation between the two are. We're going to talk about mail delivery and how mail delivery happens, how it uses SMTP, POP3, and IMAP to make this happen. Also, we'll cover or mention at least Webmail, and we'll finish things off with SPF records and what an SPF record looks like. All right, here's an example of an email address. So we've got an example at TechKnowSurge.com. And so what it knows is that this is a user that it's trying to access, and this is the domain that user is supposedly a part of. And so what it needs to know is it needs to know what server out there will be answering or will be receiving mail for TechKnowSurge.com. And so what it has to do is it has to do a DNS lookup and ask for an MX record, and it needs to know the MX record for TechKnowSurge.com. And so I'll go through the domain name systems through that process of looking up who belongs to TechKnowSurge.com and ask for the MX record. It will receive that MX record, and now it knows where I need to send this email off to. And then when it gets to the other side, that mailbox then, or that mailbox server, is going to then look at that user and determine what user that needs to go to. All right, let's take a high level of how this mail gets transferred. We have two users here, and this user wants to send mail to this user right here. And so each one of these, both of these, are the mail user agent, or the MUA. And so we're going to be sending from this MUA to this MUA. What it needs to do is this MUA has a connection or knows of that it needs to send mail to this mail submission agent. A mail submission agent is where you submit mail into. So this MSA, or mail submission agent, accepts mail. All right, from there, it's going to transfer it to a mail transfer agent. The mail transfer agent is designed to get it to where its destination, where it needs to go. And so this is the machine that actually does the lookup and tries to figure out what is the MX record for the domain that you're sending it to. So it looks it up and determines what is the server that it needs to go to, and then relays that email to that. So this is what's called a mail exchanger. The mail exchanger is what accepts mail on behalf of a domain. So in this case right here, this mail exchanger is accepting mail upon the domain that this user is a part of. So it accepts that. And then it transfers it to a mail delivery agent, in which it's going to reside on that mail delivery agent until this mail user agent gets on and pulls that email down, does a retrieval process and pulls that information down. So this is the flow that happens throughout here. Now, some of this can be combined into one server. So for instance, what I mean by that is this mail submission agent and the mail transmission agent could be one server, or it could be multiple servers. Sometimes it depends on just the size of the organization, and that depends on how much they split these individual roles out and get it separated out. But essentially, those are the components that are needed to get mail from one location to another. So how do we move this mail around? Well, one way is we do it through SMTP, or Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol operates on TCP port 25. And so that's how we move the mail around. Or nowadays, we actually use SMTPS, which happens on TCP port 587. SMTP is a way for one device to transfer mail to another device. So think of it more of as a push. It's a push of mail from one device to the next. So in this diagram, when we were looking at it, we said that the mail user agent pushed that email to the mail submission agent, which pushed it to the mail transfer agent, which pushed it to the mail exchanger, which pushed it to the mail delivery agent. So all of those use SMTP or SMTPS for transferring that data. Once again, we usually like to use SMTPS, but there is still some servers out there that use SMTP. So a lot of servers will still accept mail through SMTP. So there you have it. There is where the SMTP uses to push that mail along from device to device till it gets to the mail delivery agent. So then we're asked the question, how do we get it to the end user? How do we get it to the mail user agent? And so to do that, it's more of a pull or a sync, depending on what protocol you're talking about. So POP version 3 is a way for this user agent to reach out to the server and say, do you have any mail for me? And then it pulls it down to the client. Think of it as the client is actively going and grabbing the information and pulling it down. So because of that, we don't have a copy now on the mail delivery agent. There is a way to say, hey, leave a copy on the agent. But where I'm going with this is that POP version 3 is a great way to retrieve mail, but it has definite limitations. And so that's where we're going to get into our next protocol. IMAP is more of a sync between the mail delivery agent and the mail user agent. It syncs back and forth. So what I mean by this is that the mail user agent establishes a connection to the mail delivery agent, and they're constantly contacting back and forth, seeing if there's any updates. So if I'm sending data, then it will make that connection and send the data, or if I'm receiving data, they'll make that connection and receive the data. So think of it as a much more dynamic, open connection between the two. The advantages of this is things like I can create folders and move data around from folder to folder. If I were to do that when I was using POP version 3, I would move it into a folder, but it wouldn't appear that way on the mail delivery agent. It would just keep it where it was at, the same inbox. Versus if I do that on the mail user agent that uses IMAP, then it will sync the two up, so that way it moves the mail on the mail delivery agent as well into a folder. So it's a way to create a more dynamic connection. And one reason why we want the server to the mail delivery agent to be always updated is because we also access a webmail. So if the user is accessing or has a client and is making that connection, and that all of that information is getting updated on the server, then if, let's say, I go to my mobile device, or if I go to a web browser or other devices that are connecting in, everything is going to be updated. And so everything is going to have the most updated information. Webmail is one of those examples. So I could get onto my mailbox and be able to see my inbox and see the folders within it accessed through webmail. So webmail is another way of accessing those resources, and webmail is accessed through HTTPS. So I can use it through a web browser and access the mail. That is what webmail is. And then we have the SPF record. The SPF record is to make sure that whatever mail transfer agent is sending the mail is supposed to be sending that mail. So let me give an example. Let's say this mail transfer agent is sending to the mailbox exchanger, and it's sending mail that's something at example.com. So it's sending mail on behalf of example.com. This mailbox exchanger really doesn't know the validity of this server right here. And so what it will do is it will go and look up to the SPF record that exists in the example.com domain. So it'll do the DNS lookup and look at the example.com, look at the SPF record and say, what is your servers that should be sending mail? And then it will take a look and see if the IP address or if the name of this server should be sending that mail or not. And if it is acceptable, if it is on the SPF record, it's more likely to accept that mail and less likely to label it as junk mail. There's a couple things that we can actually do when it gets that information, when it realizes this came from a server with or without that's in or not in the SPF record, and it can handle it many different ways, and we can actually specify how it handles it. So for instance, if it receives mail from a server that it's not supposed to send mail for that domain, then what it could do is it can put that in the junk folder or label it as possible spam, or it can treat that message differently. A lot of times we don't just automatically assume that it's wrong, because there's a lot of mail that's being sent from a lot of different servers out there. So a lot of times we don't automatically assume that that is bad mail, but it labels it higher likely that it is bad mail. So that's what an SPF record does. Essentially, once again, SPF record is a check to see whatever server is sending the mail, is it the server that should be sending the mail from that, is it representing that domain? So there you have it, some email protocols. We talked about DNS and its role and how it plays in sending mail from one location to the next. We talked about mail delivery. We looked at it from a high level, and then we looked at SMTP, POP version 3, and IMAP as protocols of sending or pulling down email. And then we also mentioned Webmail and how you can get online and access mail through Webmail as well through HTTPS. And we wrap things up talking about the SPF record and just a quick review or overview of what the SPF record is used for and how it verifies the sending mail transfer agent to make sure that it is in fact an agent of the domain that should be sending mail out. Hope these videos are helping you out. If they are, can you help me out by hitting that like button?